Thank you, Steve. Well, Pastor asked me to give a testimony, and so with knees knocking and my heart thumping, I'm going to try and do that. But one thing I want you to know, after looking back all these years, and there's about 70 of them now, 70, a little over 70, it's very obvious to me that I'm a sinner. I mean, Sunday nights we've been going through the first 5 books of the Bible, and God often calls the Israelites stiff-necked, stubborn people. And boy, I'm one of them. And as I look back on it, God used people and some failures and some successes to bring people and events into my life, and kept drawing me towards Him. And I was stiff-necked and resistant to that for a long time. So I'm going to tell you a little story about these years, and hopefully you can gain some insights from. Many of you maybe know this story, but I grew up on the same farm that I live on now, and I went to the Lutheran Church to Tabor, is where I grew up. And I had 4 sisters. We were a close family, but we didn't have family devotions or church was. I was interested in church and active in it, and participated fully. After graduation from high school, I went to Midland. At that time it was called Midland Lutheran College. Now it's Midland University. And my plan was to take 2 years at Midland and then to transfer to the university and go into ag. Well, in my sophomore year, I had an advisor who said, the future in agriculture does not look good, and he really discouraged me. And so I stayed with business, and eventually I graduated from Midland, and about probably a month before I graduated, I got my draft notice to go into the Army. And at that time, it was almost the height of the Vietnam War. And so there was a wake-up call for me. You know, here's the war, you're drafted, and you better consider where you're at spiritually. So I went through training and through basic and AIT, and I got orders to go to Vietnam. And again, there's another wake-up call. You're going to war. You wonder, are these the last time I'm going to see my family? Is my spiritual life what it should be? It was another wake-up call. But again, I was, I guess I wasn't engaged to the point where I was ready to lean wholly on the Lord. So I went to Vietnam, and one of the first days I was there were 7 of us that went through training together and went over there together. And they lined us up at headquarters there, and they said, 2 of you are going out in the boonies. And they said, you and you are going out. So there's another slap in the face and a wake-up call. Here we go. Game's on. And so again, you're considering where you're at spiritually. I survived that time in Vietnam and made it back to the States. And I was stationed in Fort Riley, Kansas for a while. And one of my best friends, Tom Christ was his name. He's from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And we used to spend a lot of time playing handball and just talking. And one night, he was telling me about his experience in Vietnam. And he'd been shot in the chest, and they had used some kind of cellophane to put the wound, to seal the wound off. And he said he was in his CO's arms, and he was telling his company commander that to tell his mother that he had not had a lot of pain and that he hadn't suffered. That was the message. Well, he got him to the hospital, and he survived that. But the thing that I remembered, the wake-up call for me was, he said, here's a young, just a really neat guy that is in the prime of his life. And he said to me, you know, Rod, he said, I wish in a way that I would have died then. He said, I was around death, and I was so prepared for it that I don't think I'll ever be in that place again. And so here's another event that strikes me pretty hard, you know. I finished my term of service, and I went to work for a public accounting firm, and worked for them for a while, and then I was director of accounting at St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Lincoln. And I wasn't the best accountant, and I wasn't thrilled about my job. But my brother-in-law, he's an airline pilot, maybe many of you know him, Owen Freevert. I farmed for him during the summers when I was going to school, while he was working his hours up on the plane so he could qualify as a pilot. So he had this proposal. He said he bought 2 pieces of property, and he wanted to go in partnership with me. And so we had the one was in Chicago at the Brookfield Zoo, and it's a soft pretzel store. This is a franchise that we were going to do. And the other property was outside of the University of Minnesota in a little retail area they called Dinkytown. And it was in Dinkeydale. It was an old store, and it was a shop in Dinkeydale. So I hired some people and in Brookfield and got that set up, and then I moved to Minneapolis and did the same thing up there. And then we were going to see if this is going to be a going concern. Well, it went for a while, but it wasn't what we'd hoped it would be. The idea was to expand that and to install more franchises. So we sold the businesses, and I went to work for Honeywell in their North Ridgeway unit, which was, we produced guidance systems for bombs and missiles. And when I got up in the mornings, I wasn't excited about going to work. And so eventually, see if I can get the sequence right here. I worked there for some time, but at the same time, this is one of the best things that happened in Minneapolis. I went to the same church. Betty and I went to the same church, and that's where I met her. And interestingly enough, it was on a little bike ride through St. Paul. We had a young people's group that ate together at the church, and we did a lot of different activities together. And so the thing that struck me about Betty was her character. I was really drawn to that. She was just something special there. And so I began dating her, and it wasn't terribly long before I proposed to her. She had said, she'd swore that she would never marry a farmer, but in the back of my mind, I'd never gotten the farm out of my system. And so I had approached my dad, and he was about ready to retire, and so I moved back to Wausau in February. I proposed to Betty before that. She didn't know I was going to be a farmer, but she was very understanding. And so I moved back in the spring and helped put the crop in, and then we got married in the summer. And for her, it was really, I think, a pretty tough year, because I was so excited about farming. And it wasn't her house. We moved in with my dad, the 3 of us, for the first year and a half. And she didn't know anybody, you know, in the community. And I was usually with Dad, you know, we were farming all the time, it seemed like. So it was tough for her, but she was patient and was wonderful. So she's the hero in this story here. Agree with that. So we're at the farm, but I was going to tell you, the thing I was trying to think of at Honeywell was I had a friend, another accountant. His name was Russ Stiff. And he was bold. He would come up to me and say, "Where are you at spiritually?" Or "How are you? How's your walk?" Or, you know, he was just a kind of guy who's in your face a little bit about that. He'd just stop by the office and he would do that. And that was another wake-up call to me. And I went to a Billy Graham crusade. And again, I was right on the edge of my chair, ready to go forward, and I didn't do it. One more slap in the face, one more event that's pushing me towards the Lord. So when Betty and I got married, we moved back to Wausau. We went to the Lutheran church, and I still just wasn't at peace, I guess you would say. We went to there was a group called the Lundstroms, and they were a musical group, but they also had a real evangelical message. And they came to Yankton, and we went up there, and I don't think it was anything they said or any great movement, but they did have an altar call, and I finally stepped forward and made a commitment that I'm going to change my lifestyle, I'm going to give up some things, and I'm going to follow Christ. And so, fortunately, they had a follow-up program, and Oliver and Leona Gustafson called us and invited us to a Bible study up at their house. And Bruce Thorsons and Marilyn Wakely, they were part of the group, and Kurt and Kathy Hennings, and there was one other, I don't know, were you part of that, Steve? Yeah, we just met in the homes, and it was Bible study. And that, to me, was where my heart is small groups. I mean, I've been a part of a men's group up in Bloomfield for over 20 years, and then our Saturday morning group too. And I've got guys that will say, well, Rich is in that group, and Daryl Farringer and Dave Olson, and then there's 3 or 4 other people from other faiths. But we're at the point where, how's your walk going? What kind of problems do you have? Can we pray for you? You know, and that to me has been real special. That's about the end of my story. I had one little card here. I might have missed a few things, but I just want to encourage you that keep going forward, to not stand still, to be ready to get out of your comfort zone. Maybe stand up here like I am and share, or to do something that gets you to move forward instead of stay where you're at. But thank you.